Gold Glove finalists have been announced by Major League Baseball, and we will dive into the Cardinals who were named on that list. This is Card Central 365 here on STL Sports Central. All content brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Joe Roderick, Brendan Schaefer with you here today. And Brendan, Gold Gloves in St. Louis. We knew Masyn Winn was going to be a finalist, and we'll get into whether or not he might be a favorite for that, but a little bit maybe of a surprise as Victor Scott II is named a finalist for the center field position in the National League. I'll start with that. Were you surprised to see Victor Scott II named on that list?
No, I don't think I was. I mean, statistically, I think it holds up. He, just like Masyn Winn, is one very near the top of the statistical leaderboard, at least in the outs above average category that Baseball Savant comes up with all the StatCast data. He's listed with 17 outs above average this season. That's tied for 7th in MLB across all positions. Only Pete Crow-Armstrong at the center field position in the National League is higher. Now, PCA did lead all of baseball, tied with Bobby Witt Jr. with 24 outs above average. So I would say PCA probably the favorite. I know that's not the only statistic we could look at, but he's also kind of got the name recognition, I think, that he established this year with the Cubs, a team that made the playoffs.
Also, MLB, their Twitter account, they put out the list of all of the finalists for this. They did one for the American League, they did one for the National League. And in the National League finalists, they used PCA's picture as the background for it as well. So
yeah,
if Carl Ravitch is giving away this award, PCA, I mean, runs away with it. I think we all heard how much he loves Pete Crow-Armstrong this past year, but it looks like MLB also going down the same route.
That's the way you'd market it, and I kind of understand it. So like I said, I don't know if Vic can win the award. I think he will win a Gold Glove someday, but with all the different things, and I know it's not just the way that it used to be, right? There's a statistical component to this as well, rather than just pure voting for the Gold Glove and in the different ways that they come up with who wins it. But I think even in the statistical component, you probably end up with PCA getting an edge, at least in some of the stats I'm looking at. But no, I don't think I was surprised that Victor Scott is one of the top three, because I think we all have seen him demonstrate the type of defensive center fielder that he is. I feel like he made some real considerable strides this season compared to even last year and what we had seen from him before. The instincts, I think, are continuing to improve. The raw ability and the talent, the athleticism, I think, was always there. But I think he played a really good center field this year. It is nice to see him recognized as a finalist, but I don't know if that's one where if he doesn't win it, there's an uproar among Cardinals fans. There might be a bit of an uproar among Cardinals fans if Masyn Winn doesn't win it, Joe, because I do think he is the most deserving candidate at shortstop.
Yeah, that's one I want to get into with Masyn Winn. Before we go any further, though, just want to remind people that all of our content brought to you by DraftKings. The crown is yours. Use that promo code STL Sports when you download the DraftKings Sportsbook app and grab $300 in bonus bets with just a $5 bet when we go live on December 1st. That's code STL Sports in partnership with DraftKings Sportsbook. Gambling problem? Call 1-800-GAMBLER. 21 plus, physically present in Missouri. Eligibility restrictions apply. Bonus bets expire 7 days after issuance. Excludes customers who redeem pre-launch sign-up offer. Terms at sportsbook.draftkings.com/promos. When it comes to Masyn Winn, we saw in St. Louis the defensive shows that he put on multiple times. So with the glove, with the arm, with everything he did. The numbers that you look at and the lack of errors, the defensive runs saved, everything else kind of points also to Masyn Winn being a defensive superstar in this game. But as we know, and as you mentioned earlier, the award of Gold Glove is kind of a popularity contest at times. And I have seen more and more here over the last couple of weeks now about Mookie Betts and the season that he had playing shortstop. And when you look at the fact that he was asked to move to shortstop this year after playing second base, after playing right field, after all of the other places, just the constant movement of Mookie Betts as a defender and the above average level that he plays there, I feel like Masyn Winn could have had a perfect season with 50 defensive runs saved. And it just feels like Mookie Betts is just going to be awarded the Gold Glove based on name alone. Then that's not. I mean, the numbers also show Mookie Betts is very deserving of being a finalist and would be deserving of winning it. It just seems like popularity wise, Mookie Betts is going to get this award.
Yeah, if that's a tiebreaker, Masyn Winn's in trouble because Masyn is younger in his career, still kind of establishing himself. It shouldn't factor in, but I think offense often does because it is sort of one of those categories that develops a player into a star. And we know Mookie Betts has a track record offensively that has allowed him to get that name recognition. I'm to understand, I think these awards, like, again, when they name someone a finalist, it's not like they're in the running. We'll see who wins. It's already known somewhere who won, and these are the top three vote getters or the top three finishers at the respective positions. So nothing that happens, it'll feel like, well, Mookie's still involved in the playoffs, and so that's going to be to his benefit. It'll feel that way. It won't be real because the answer's already known somewhere. We just don't have it. We know who the top three finalists are, but it's already been determined. Still, the factor of the Dodgers of it all, to your point, I think is going to play into the benefit of Mookie Betts. And it is interesting, too. It's almost one of those things that comes down to what do you like best as a defensive statistic. I cited outs above average from Baseball Savant with the StatCast data. 17 was Masyn Winn's outs above average. And remember, he was really leading the way until he missed the majority of September. Obviously, wasn't still able to rack up statistics at that point because he was on the injured list. But Masyn Winn, ended up with 21 outs above average. Vic was at 17. Masyn at 21, tied for third with Cabrian Hayes, Rafaela of the Red Sox, and there's Masyn. Only Bobby Witt and PCA were better in that category. Mookie Betts only coming in with 5 outs above average. That's tied for 55th in baseball. I don't know where it ranks among shortstops, but not anything close to what Masyn Winn was putting up. But then if you look at defensive runs saved, Mookie Betts leads the way at shortstop with 17. And for whatever reason, defensive runs saved, Masyn Winn coming in with just a couple. It's not nearly the same. And so you've got really two completely different stats that are measuring defensive value in different ways. And in one of them, Masyn Winn is far and away the leader, with Mookie Betts not coming in very impressively. The other one, Mookie Betts, far and away the leader, Masyn Winn not coming in very impressively. And so if those are two things that you look at, you consider the reputations of both players. I think Masyn Winn does have a reputation for being a really good defensive player, but he's only been around for a couple few years. Mookie Betts been around, and to your point, the narrative of, oh, he switched positions and still put up these numbers, people are probably going to pick and choose and look for the reasons to give it to him rather than the reasons to take it away. Even if we in St. Louis think, how could they not give it to Masyn Winn? That's sort of evaluating the process for what it may be, Joe.
As you look at some of the other names on this list, and if you just start with who is going up against the two Cardinals that are named on here, at first on shortstop, I got to admit I'm unfamiliar with Nick Allen's game at short to be that third name on this list with Mookie Betts and with Masyn Winn. If you watch the first 2 rounds of the postseason this year and you kind of look at defensively, Dansby Swanson just seems to be this godsend for Cubs fans at shortstop this year. Nico Horner is listed as one of the finalists for second base, but Nick Allen from the Braves just had such an abysmal season this past year. I think any Braves player outside of Ronald Acuna has kind of flown under the radar as far as name recognition in the game of baseball this season.
Well, yeah, and Nick Allen really has not ever been an offensive stalwart, right? His glove is probably why the Braves pick him up in the first place. They traded for him in November. I'm trying to see for right-handed pitcher Jared Johnson, kind of an under the radar trade, but I feel like the Braves said, look, this guy with the athletics was a really good fielder, and that is just a position where, like, the Braves in the past have been comfortable with that. Remember, Andrelton Simmons was their shortstop, and he wasn't always a big-time offensive contributor, but he could pick it at shortstop. And so I feel like they identified Nick Allen for that, and his numbers really good defensively, 12 defensive runs saved, which is ahead of what we mentioned with Masyn Winn. It's off the pace of Mookie Betts. On the outs above average category, Nick Allen at 17, Masyn Winn at 21. So Nick Allen is kind of bridging the gap there. He's good in both categories of those defensive statistics, but not a lot of name recognition, not a lot of offensive production that's going to get his name in the headlines as often, but really solid shortstop based on all the statistics. I would say probably Masyn Winn. I would be considering more likely to win it than Nick Allen. But again, we've talked about Mookie Betts being that third candidate and the one that there's a hill to climb when it comes to overcoming the reputation of a Dodger and a fan favorite, a superstar that is marketed in the game like Mookie is.
Impressive for 37-year-old Tommy Pham to be on this list as well. He was named a finalist for the Pirates out in left field, up against Kyle Stowers and Ian Happ. I would just say, I mean, for the journeyman that Tommy Pham is at his age as well, pretty impressive, just to be named a finalist for him.
Yeah, that is interesting. And looking at some of the numbers, defensive runs saved 5 for him, so behind a good handful of National League left fielders. In the outs above average category, did not rank as favorably. But I think probably a reputation as a player that really gets after it defensively. So I wonder if, despite maybe some of the statistical component not favoring Tommy quite as much, if he ended up getting some votes, in terms of the people that are actually voting for this and folks that have gone up against him and seen what he does out there in the outfield. His arm certainly, is something that we have seen, not one that you want to take lightly or test lightly. And so, interesting for him. Good for him as well. I'm sure he's thrilled to be getting that consideration. I'm sure he probably has thoughts on who should win it as well. If anybody would ask him, that would be fun to see his reaction. But no, I think that's cool for the former Cardinal, no doubt.
One of those defensive runs saved came in early April, if you remember, against the Cardinals in the extra inning.
You don't want to test his arm lightly. You don't want to take that lightly.
And see, I can't remember who he threw out, but it was by a good 40 feet.
It was not close. I remember that. Yeah.
Outside of that, no other former Cardinals on this list that I'm seeing as I'm going through all of these. So Carson Kelly, I should mention Carson Kelly, former Cardinal, listed under the catchers for the season for the Cubs, and just kind of adds another feather in the cap of that redemption season that he had in Chicago this past year, just surprising many people. Yeah.
That's notable because, I mean, I don't really think we viewed him that way when he was with the Cardinals. And obviously he's had a long and winding path. Nobody would ever say that it wasn't a good trade to bring in Paul Goldschmidt, but he put it together at the plate, certainly with the Cubs this year, but doing it defensively as well at the position in the National League where you think about Yadier Molina winning as many of those as he did. That is probably not a guy that, no offense, I probably just wouldn't have pegged Carson Kelly for having that type of future at any point. And that proves us wrong there. I'm looking elsewhere at Cardinals defensively. I don't know that there are really any snubs necessarily here, Joe, but I do want to mention Wilson Contreras did finish at first base with 6 outs above average, which I don't have it sorted right now by position, but I'll go ahead and do that and update you on just where that ranked among National League first basemen. Matt Olson had 9, and Wilson Contreras at 6 among guys that looks like spent their whole season and finished on a team this year. Ty France and Carlos Santana ranked pretty well, but I think they ended up getting released.
Ty France traded.
Traded. Okay, so that's why
traded,
there's the MLB logo with him instead of a team name. So yeah, I mean that's toward the very top of baseball at that position, at least in one statistical category, outs above average. I'm not suggesting that Wilson was snubbed from Gold Glove finalist consideration, but at least one statistical category would say at a minimum, he did a very underrated job of making that transition happen. I think he's a really good athlete. And so I'm not particularly surprised by that. But that's notable to me. And then I really do think if it had gone a little differently for the health of Nolan Arenado, you might have seen him not probably winning the award at third base. You can rattle off, if you can have it in front of you there, Joe, the third base finalist in the National League. But I do think that he was playing at a very high level for a while and then obviously missed a whole bunch of time. And the final numbers don't end up maybe accumulating and reflecting. He was 3 outs above average, 9th among MLB third basemen, about top 5 or so among just National League third basemen. I think Brian Hayes is going to become a name to watch, obviously, for years to come at that category. But
the finalists at third base, Ke'Bryan Hayes, who spent parts of the year with the Pirates and the Reds.
Right.
Matt Shaw, the third baseman for the Cubs. And then Ryan McMahon listed as a finalist for the National League.
That's so hard. Yeah.
Even though he started with the Rockies and ended with the Yankees. It should also be noted, Carlos Santana, who you mentioned, one of the first basemen, started the year with the Guardians and then ended up on the Cubs at the end of the season for that. But he is listed as a finalist in the American League for his time with the Guardians.
I think maybe that's just, I wonder if that's consistent across the board where they're like, if you're traded right around the deadline, we're going to list you as where you started rather than where you finished, because they played more time, obviously, with those teams since the deadline is closer to the end of the season. Just wanted to check in with defensive run save leaderboard as well. Nolan Arenado had 6 defensive runs saved. So what I say, 3 outs above average, 6 defensive runs saved, ranking behind guys like Hayes and Matt Shaw and McMahon, all 3. But just, notable that he did have a pretty good season. And I think his numbers would have been right around at least the lower end of some of those names had he played a full year. But obviously the health with his shoulder, took him out of a pretty good portion of the season. So those are the two that I guess jumped out would have been Wilson and Arenado.
And I would be interested to know if there was an innings cap on this, if there was an amount that they needed to play, because you look at the list, Ke'Bryan Hayes, who I would assume is going to win it in the National League, almost 1,300 innings at third base this year, 1,283, and Nolan Arenado played 880 at third base this year, so almost 400 innings less than Ke'Bryan Hayes played.
I'm looking at this and trying to verify it, because anytime something pops up from Google, you normally cannot just rattle it off and count it as real. But it sounds familiar from what I was looking up last year as it pertained to, I'm trying to remember if it was Siani or who it was that we were kind of wondering last year, and we thought he wasn't going to be eligible, and then it turns out they said no, he was. He just didn't rate as a finalist. But this reads here that you, by your 141st team game, need at least 713 innings. So don't quote me on that if that's exactly. I'm doing a control F here, so if we get there's the error sound. So that's clearly not what it is, even though Google AI told me it was. All infield. This is from Rawlings directly. All infielders and outfielders must have played in the field for at least 698 innings through his team's 138th game. So let that be a lesson. Do not look at the Google AI stuff, because it's usually wrong. 638 innings, 138th game, approximately 7.5 innings per game. And I guess they cut that off kind of before the final, month or so, just because they figure they've got the data they need. They got to probably get the votes in during the remainder of the season. And so that's the way that they do that. So I think based on that, Arenado would have narrowly qualified, Joe, but I guess I would have to go back and look at his box scores, because he did play some at the end there for the Cardinals too.
Gold gloves for the Cardinals. They have not won a gold glove since 2022. So it has been it's been a couple years since the Cardinals won a gold glove.
And that was Donovan at that point in time for the utility?
And Arenado, both. He won it in 22 as well.
Oh, okay. There you go.
Yeah. Then 21, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 players in the 2021 season won gold gloves for the Cardinals then. So it's as I look through here, as I scroll through here, if they do not win one this year, it would be the longest that they have gone without winning one since between the 2015-2018 season, when they went without winning a gold glove during that stretch.
Yeah. I think the 2 players, though, that are finalists this year, and again, it's probably Mookie, but I won't be surprised if it's Masyn. I think he deserves it. I do think it'll be PCA in center field instead of Victor Scott II. But when you look at, kind of thinking ahead toward the future, Masyn Winn and Victor Scott, I know offensively both need to do a little bit more, but when you think about ways to turn around an organization, be solid up the middle defensively is something that's often preached. You've got 2/3 of that right there. Figure out what it looks like behind the plate at catcher, and that's at least kind of a starting point. Those are 2 young guys that over the course of, let's assume they both stick around and the Cardinals extend them if their bats dictate that they're longtime big league, starting players. You could see both of those guys take home a decent amount of hardware, I think, over the next 5 to 10 years. And hopefully, you build offensively around it. You don't need either of those players to be all-star players necessarily. It'd be nice if Masyn Winn would turn into that. But if they're both league average offensively, OPS of 710, 720, and, just more consistency at the plate, but they're bringing in Gold Glove awards, I think that plays, Joe. But I do think it would mean if you're kind of conceding that you're going to be more defense first up the middle, you do need those corner outfield spots to be boppers, and those corner infielders, you have to have guys who can mash at those kind of 4 positions to be able to not justify, but like let the puzzle fit together for the Cardinals to be a truly contending organization with maybe that defense first mentality. Maybe those 2 guys turn into better hitters, Joe, than what they've produced so far. But based on that sort of makeup of your roster, that is what that says to me. I'm all in on these 2 guys defensively. What do they become offensively, and how do the Cardinals build around them with bats? I think becomes an interesting question in the coming years.
Let us know in the comments your thoughts on the 2 Gold Glove finalists, Victor Scott II and Masyn Winn for the National League. And if you think anybody on the Cardinals was snubbed and who you think might have a chance at taking home the 2025 Gold Glove. Winners announced on Sunday, November 2nd by Major League Baseball. Until tomorrow, he's Brendan Schaefer. I'm Joe Roderick. This has been Card Central 365 here on STL Sports Central.